Nearly 80% of Ford vehicles sold in the United States are assembled domestically, which is so. But behind this figure lies a complex global supply chain. From lithium in South America, aluminum in Canada, to microchips in Asia. Ford's production line is closely linked to international suppliers. And now, every bolt, metal sheet, and circuit board is subject to new tariffs. What is the financial impact? Ford is estimated to lose $1.50 billion in profits by 2025. Not because demand is declining. Ford can still sell cars, but because production costs have surged significantly. Mr. Farley highlights a clear paradox. The more Ford produces in the U.S., the more it suffers from these protectionist measures. Meanwhile, foreign competitors operate in regions free of tariffs, giving them a pricing advantage. As a result, Ford is forced to reevaluate everything, from assembly lines and logistics to its overall business strategy for survival. Ford is not retreating, but they are strategically repositioning. The company's production footprint is clearly shifting away from U.S. soil. All evidence points to one undeniable truth: Ford is moving toward a fully global supply chain. Mexico remains central to this strategy, offering lower tariffs, cheaper labor, and close proximity to the U.S. market. It has long been an important manufacturing hub for Ford. At the same time, Southeast Asia is emerging as the next low-cost base of the DUM, where components can be produced quickly and free from tariff barriers. From wiring harnesses to electronic components, these parts can be sourced in that region efficiently and cost-effectively. Meanwhile, Ford is also highlighting certain parts of Europe as politically stable and supportive of electric vehicle technology. When Ford shifts its production lines outside the U.S., the consequences extend far beyond the factory gates. This ripple effect gradually impacts the entire domestic supply chain across America. Critical materials like lithium, aluminum, rare earths, mechanical components, and drive systems, once essential to Ford's manufacturing, also served as vital lifelines for hundreds of small and mid-sized suppliers nationwide. However, the negative impact goes deeper than the factory floor. The closure of even a single supplier triggers a domino effect. Logistics providers, maintenance teams, inspection services, and financial networks tied to that operation begin to unravel one by one. While Ford can adapt with backup plans, Plan B, C, and D, the local supply chain lacks such flexibility. Finding new clients is a challenge, switching industries even harder, and surviving being cut off from a production ecosystem you've supported for decades is nearly impossible. Immediately after Ford announced its production restructuring plan, the company's stock price rose slightly. The message from Wall Street is clear. They are not focused on patriotism, but on profit margins. The question investors are considering is that if Ford vehicles are no longer truly made in America, do they still hold the same value in the eyes of everyday consumers? This is raising growing concerns among investors about a gradual decline in brand loyalty. Ford, long an icon of American manufacturing, may soon have to win over customers not through heritage, but through competitive pricing. Ford has decided to prioritize profits. However, this may come at the cost of trust. Profits take center stage in the focus of financial markets, with shareholders demanding aggressive cost-cutting. Analysts describe this as a necessary restructuring. However, for millions of Americans, Ford represents far more than just a business. Historically, Ford has been a symbol, a legacy passed down through generations, and an inseparable part of Midwestern culture. Ford is not only an employer, but also a tradition. Now, as assembly lines move overseas, the trust once tied to those factories gradually fades away. Ford is facing the risk of collapse under the pressure of a tariff tsunami, with $10 billion in revenue potentially being swept away. If this ship sinks, how will we, the consumers, bear the consequences? China's new tariff policies are putting Ford at significant risk of heavy losses as it halts imports of American cars, including flagship models like the F-150 and Explorer. In 2024, China accounted for 15% of total revenue for U.S. automakers, with Ford expected to generate around $5 billion from this market. However, with these new policies in place, Ford could lose up to 20% of its global revenue, equating to $5 billion annually. Additionally, auto parts imported from China are now subject to high tariffs, raising production costs by $2,000 to $5,000 per vehicle. This represents a major financial burden for Ford amidst escalating trade tensions. It's not just China. The EU is also ramping up retaliatory measures against the US, including restrictions on American car imports, particularly targeting Ford vehicles. The EU represents about 25% of Ford's export revenue, with key markets like Germany, France, and Italy being particularly significant. If these policies are implemented, Ford could lose between $3 and $4 billion annually, giving competitors like Volkswagen and BMW an opportunity to capture market share. What's even more concerning is that the EU is a crucial market for Ford's electric vehicle, EV, initiatives. With tariffs raising production costs, Ford risks falling behind in the fiercely competitive EV race. Ford's production costs are skyrocketing due to tariffs and rising raw material prices. Experts predict Ford will need to raise car prices by $2,000 to $4,000 per unit, making vehicles significantly more expensive for consumers, especially middle-class buyers. This price hike could lead to a decline in demand for Ford's vehicles, resulting in significant global revenue losses. If this trend continues, Ford could lose up to 30% of its revenue from these markets within the next 1 to 2 years, severely reducing the company's profitability. The U.S. auto industry is facing a significant crisis due to the tariff policies of China and the EU. Ford's plants in Ohio, Michigan, and Kentucky will need to reduce production as export orders decline. This could result in job losses ranging from 5,000 to 10,000, particularly in engine and auto parts production facilities. Declining production and job losses, the reduced orders, are pressurizing Ford to slash costs, leading to layoffs and production cuts. This will directly affect workers and result in job losses in critical auto manufacturing regions like Ohio and Michigan. Increased competition and the unemployment risk. Global competitors like Volkswagen and BMW will capitalize on the opportunity to grow their market share while putting more pressure on Ford and contributing to higher unemployment in the auto industry. The production cuts also disrupt the supply chain and impact parts suppliers, pushing even more workers into unemployment. Supply chain disruption. The drop in production interferes with the supply chain, adversely affecting parts suppliers and exacerbating unemployment in the auto sector, worsening the overall economic crisis. Ford is facing an important decision. Can it maintain its position in the U.S. auto industry, or will it be overtaken by international competitors? Trump asserts that the tariff policies are meant to protect American workers, but Ford opposes this stance and calls for a collaborative solution for sustainable development. While Trump views these tariffs as a strategy to protect workers, the reality is that these tariffs are causing significant damage to the U.S. auto industry. Without changing its business strategy, Ford may find it difficult to maintain its competitive edge.